ever said something online and had it completely misconstrued into something that was way beyond anything you were ever talking about? Welcome back to Listen to Leo. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the difficulties with online communication. And specifically, this came up for me as I was added to a group chat on Twitter the other day and started sharing kind of what I was doing. And I was talking about quantum economics and things like that. And from that, someone in the chat started saying stuff about trying to make stock picks and have systems and things like that, which, if you've listened to anything, is completely not at all relevant to anything I talk about. In fact, I don't like the stock market. It's very, very hard to predict, and that's why I'm focusing a lot on the things that I can predict using the principles of quantum economics. But that made me think about just how difficult it can be to communicate online, because a lot of times we're talking about communication through a very, very narrow window, right? It's a lot of just very, very small text messages, sometimes short videos, things like that, where you can't always get the full picture. And on platforms like Twitter, where things are moving very, very quickly, and in this group chat, which was growing larger and larger, messages fly by, it's very hard to get the full context. And so people start keying in on words that they have associations with. And one of those happens to be things like quantum. For some people, quantum means like magical woo-woo that's just a word for something that isn't easily explained. But in this case, it's really talking about economics through the lens of uncertainty, and specifically related to the economics of information. Because of the way information works and the way humans process information, it becomes a much more difficult problem to understand how valuable a given piece of information is at a given time. And so I use very specific models to determine what the desired outcomes are, and then try to make very, very small decisions or bets, right, based on the information that I have available, knowing that there's a lot of information that's not available. And so it's about trying to make more accurate predictions by making very, very small decisions much more rapidly. So anyway, in this case, I said absolutely nothing about the stock market. And in fact, I explained a lot about what I was doing. It was really in relation to the work I was doing with my AI co-founder. And yeah, that really stuck with me because, again, I said nothing about the stock market. And one of the things I found is that people, in the absence of information, will typically substitute in information from their own experience and their own history. And so when you don't have the complete picture in front of you, your brain fills it in with previous experience. And in fact, it's not only on a platform like Twitter or things like that. Your brain actually does this all the time. And so what we do is we take very, very narrow amounts of information and we widen that out by filling in the gaps with the stuff that we know. And so if you actually look at how the brain functions, a lot of the time is spent filling in the gaps. So in online communication, that is the trickiest part, is you're never sure exactly how your post or your video or whatever is going to be received. It's all about where the person has come from, what life experience they've had, what emotions they associate with different words, and how people have typically presented those words to them. And so the language we use is a very inexact thing. And the same word can mean very, very different things to very, very different people. And that poses a huge challenge. And, at its worst, it can really result in things like online harassment and everything based around the usage of a given word. And I don't believe that this is a great way to move forward, because even the use of different words is changing rapidly. And so there are words that, previously were used all the time and now are like, oh, you can't say that. That's not something we say. That's hurtful to somebody, right? And I think there is a lot of, it is very important to watch the words we use and make sure that we're not harming people. But also you have to understand, from the other side, if people haven't been following, the evolution of terms, they're not necessarily going to know which word is the one that's currently acceptably used. And so they're going to just fall back on the words that they know and use all the time. And so if you attack people for using these words, then they become defensive and want to hold on to that word even more. And so I think what you have to do when it comes to online communication is just be very, very clear about the meaning of the words that you're using and why you're using them. And just allow kind of the frequency of use to spread that meaning as a kind of shared understanding of a given word or phrase. And when you apply this to something like business, you can look at it in terms of things like category creation, right? So companies will try to create their own category so that you're not pre-associating concepts with a category of tools when they don't necessarily want to fit into that. And the nice thing is, too, you can also kind of set your own valuation on a tool in a new category as opposed to relying on kind of the existing pricing models of a previous software category. We're seeing a lot of this now with AI especially. And if you want a very humorous example, actually, that I came up with, I was listening to the Jordan Harbinger show, specifically the most recent Skeptical Sunday episode on bottled water. And the co-host for that show is British, and he was talking about Dasani and how they brought Dasani over to the UK and had all this advertising around, it's the water with spunk. The problem is, spunk in the US typically referred to kind of like energy, excitement, things like that. In the UK, it means semen. Like that's just what it is. And so by using the word in a different area of the world, it has a completely different context. And so when you see a bottle of water with spunk in it, yeah, not quite the bottle of water that maybe you were hoping to buy. And from my understanding, as a result, there is now no Dasani water in the UK. It's something that can have these lasting consequences. And so it is really important to understand how the words we use will be received by our target audience. And understand that words change meaning over time. And so it's something that you have to constantly be aware of. And when you're trying to really clarify your messaging, you need to make sure that you're being consistent with your message. You're being, you're clearly defining the terms that you're using, and you're really making an effort to overly communicate, because you have to communicate more than you would if you're in like a trusted discussion with a friend, because it's not going to be received the same way. And in fact, it's probably going to be received with all sorts of baggage around it. And that's why when you say something online, it's probably going to get taken completely out of context, and people will start attacking you for things that you didn't actually say. It's because they've got these preconceived notions of what different words mean, and some people's updating of the meaning and suitability of a given word will change faster than others. And unfortunately, with the way the internet kind of forces us to compete for attention, it ends up with these kind of online flame wars, and you've got all sorts of trolls attacking you for this, that, or the other. But in the end, I think it's important to just remember that people are people, and really try to dig deeper into understanding what people mean more, as opposed to just taking what they say at face value and assigning the definitions that you use for those words to all the words in a given setting, because chances are they probably meant it differently too. And so when you start seeing it from both sides of that coin, you start to have a lot more empathy and compassion for the people you see trying to communicate online, because it is a very, very difficult thing to do. And barring that, if you don't want to do that, you can always go to My AI Co-Founder, sign up for free, and just track your own thoughts. That way you get to dictate the context that things are received in. It's kind of like single player Twitter. And so you can just put your thoughts in and use that to, have more clarity around what you're saying. Whereas if you're doing it on a place like Twitter, sometimes it is hard because messages can be incorrectly received. And one of the things that I've learned over the past few years is that it can be very, very difficult to actually get the message out that you're trying to get out because sometimes people are just gonna be like, "Hey, yeah, you're a scammer. You're trying to sell me this course on stock market picks." Yeah, I'm not selling a course on stock market picks. I don't believe you should be trying to pick the stock market that way. The stock market is something that grows over time. It's the data is too highly compressed to make any meaningful insights into being able to predict it, and so I don't believe that you should really go that route. In fact, you should work on building and doing work and stuff that is actually valuable in the moment, because that's what we need. And it comes back to people, and you want to give people the information they need now in order to be successful later. And that is where quantum economics comes into this. And from the communication standpoint, you really want to make sure that you are over communicating and you're really trying to spread a very specific message. And by doing it over and over again, the people who are around you the most will have a shared understanding with you. And then your messaging can really be geared towards them. And so this is the idea of niching down and really connecting with people on a smaller level. Because once you do that, you can expand from there. And I've been able to see that personally as my messages in smaller groups have become more widely accepted. People are starting to really ask questions. They're starting to dig in, and they're really starting to get it. And when it's something like quantum economics, that can be a hard sell. People tend to be scared of that idea, but in the end, it is something that you can be successful at. You just have to understand that sometimes what you say will be read in a completely different context. And so be aware of that, and just make sure that you over communicate, because that's what needs to happen in order to really get that message out over time. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm hoping that maybe you're luckier than me and not getting misunderstood online all the time, but it is what it is. And this is what I've chosen, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So I'll see you next time.